Kia ora. My name's Julie DeLip. I am a plant ecologist at Victoria University of Wellington. And I've been working in Tongariro National Park for about 5 years now, studying the effects of climate change and the invasion of heather on culturally important plants. We've been working with Ngāti Rangi and particularly Komatua to identify plants that are of cultural significance to the iwi.
I believe that every plant has got a duty. Every plant has its mauri, and it's whatever it does is helping to look after the earth, to look after the whenua. Papa Tuanuku, they all give something to keep Papa Tuanuku alive.
As Ngāti Rangi, we are based at the foothills of Mount Ruapehu on the western to southern, southeastern flanks. Ngāti Rangi is a tribe within the Whanganui Confederation, and so our rohe is actually bigger than that because we had access to the river, the Whanganui River, as well as to the sea. And so we would be nomadic and move, whether it's down to the ocean or up to the mountain, and so we would move between those different places and would harvest according to the seasons.
Tongariro National Park is a really special place. I've lived here full-time for 15 months doing fieldwork for this project and several other projects as well, all related to climate change and heather invasion in the park. It's a really special place to me, but obviously not just me. It's a UNESCO Natural and Cultural World Heritage Site, which really speaks to both the importance of this place in terms of its ability to be a safe place for indigenous species, which occur nowhere else in the world. But it also speaks to the importance of this landscape in this place to Māori.
Our pepeha, we start from our maunga. The terms of Ngāti Rangi is Ruapehu te maunga, ko whangaihu te awa, ko Ngāti Rangi te iwi. Whenever you get sand and water meeting, it's usually on a beach where the tides are kind of ended, where the rivers have ended. But here where Te Onetapu is, where the sands of Te Onetapu are, they are where waters begin. So in between the desert road and Ruapehu is where Te Onetapu is situated. It's a very sacred area and it translates to the sacred sands, named 41 generations ago by our tupuna back then. The sacred sands that actually carry the minerals and the nutrients from our volcanic mountain, from our ancestral mountain Ruapehu, and disperse them all over the whenua. That dispersal of nutrients and of mineral content from volcanic origin provides the land with energy boosts.
With how we are looking after it today, and with global warming, you know, most of the plants like cold, well, a lot of mountain plants anyway, and when it gets warmer, it goes further up the top until nothing.
As scientists from Victoria University in Wellington, we've been working together in collaboration with several iwi here, and most notably with Ngāti Rangi. We collaborated on this project looking at Taonga Tipu, so species which are culturally important. Within that collaboration, what we asked from Ngāti Rangi was for a whole series of interviews which helped us to identify species which were of cultural importance, and then we took those species that we had identified and modelled them and in their responses to both climate change and heather invasion.
This area traditionally was used for karakia and gathering of titi. The majority of the things that we would do up there would be go up to acknowledge our sacred sites and to inter bones and to do karakia.
Just some of the things about the sacred nature of Te Onetapu. It was a place that was a hunting ground, a food gathering place for our people. Whenever Ngāti Rangi would come into this area, they would always wash certain rivers and certain streams. And they'll go on to Te Onetapu, they'll collect their resources and take them back home.
So the very first thing we do when we want to understand how climate change or weed invasion is going to affect our Taonga Tipu is we go out in the field and we collect a lot of data.
So the plants that are there also special, which is why they're all little, because they don't need to compete, they don't need to fight for the sun. Whereas in the bush, there's always a competition, there's always a juggling to ensure that the symbiotic connection between everything that grows still gets a bit of light. Whereas up in the whenua, there's less need for the juggling. and so they only grow to a certain height. Yep, altitude also helps that, but it's a place to ensure that these things grow and also feed the wairua of that place.
The thing that makes alpine plants really different from all other types of plants is the fact that they're really well adapted to difficult and harsh environments. First of all, of course it gets really cold, but it gets really hot. And so that large variation in temperature is actually really difficult to deal with. So how do you design your body in a way that makes it able to tolerate both being underneath snow and being torn by the wind and also being exposed to just extreme high temperatures? So quite often we get 40 degrees Celsius, but we also get negative 10 degrees Celsius. They tend to have smaller leaves, they tend to be closer to the ground in order to not get swept up by the wind. They tend to have tougher tissue that sticks around for longer, and they keep all of their energy in the root system over the winter so that when the summer comes around, they're ready to pop back up and come back to life.
So we go out in the field and we put down little 1 meter plots and just count the plant species that are there and how much of the ground they cover. And this gives us a sense of how dominant they are. And we do that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times all over the mountain. So we have a really good idea over elevation or in little microhabitats how the species will occur.
Magic happens when you're in front, when you're at the place, when you're there with it. You pick up things that you wouldn't have realised before. So it really is important that what we have is preserved, not just for Māori's identity, but really, for the identity of our whenua, for the identity of Aotearoa.
So the way that we identify important plant species as scientists is generally either by looking at whether they are special or are really different from other plant species in that environment. Landscapes such as this one is important from an ecological conservation perspective, but it's also important because it has cultural weight, right? And we can't quantify that. So we wanted to choose species which were different from one another so that we could have a general understanding about how plant species were going to respond as a whole to both climate change and the invasion of heather. There was Gentianella belladifolia, or the white gentian. That's a very small herb that we find only very high up in Tongariro. And that's a really special plant because it produces these really large charismatic flowers.
It was a token of love. It was well sought over by certain chiefs who could traverse those upper lands on our mountains or those higher alpine areas, who would go and sought puapua to give to their loved ones. Puanani and puapua, they appear when riehu is around, so that's the summer. So those are the kind of indications that those plants give. They tell you what season it is, and you only get the puanani and the puapua in the alpine regions.
Dracophyllum recurvum, or curly-leaved nene, is an interesting plant because it's got quite a lot of root stock and it tends to live in places like this which are really disturbed.
There are resources like the different forms of nene, and in this case it's the nene-riki, or the small nene, has other names as well. And so that's one thing that we would gather, and that's been revived again in the last probably 15 years, 20 years.
I've had some nene from over in Tākaka, that's South Island, and they're a bigger one. They're about a foot long. And these are ones only about, 2 inches, 3 inches. I only went to harvest nene probably 10 years ago. I knew what I was looking for. I've been told about it. I waited till the time came, a special time of the year, and went to look for it and found it. As easy as that. And we collected some, and I brought it home and sort of dried it out proper. And then, over the years my fingers are like they are and they can't do nothing. So I thought I'd pass them on to somebody that will. And I've seen a cloak made out of it, and it's so beautiful, so fine and delicate.
If you know anything about coprosmas, which you might because the New Zealand flora is absolutely full of them, Coprosma purpursula, it's not like any of the ones that you're likely to see in the forest. It crawls right along the ground, just never gets any taller than about 3 or 4 centimetres.
They call it diversity, but really biodiversity. So you lose one thing, it's got a cause and effect that ripples through until a balance is found again.
So what the field work tells us is that in every one of those 1 kilometre grids, we can say, does this plant species occur there or does it not occur there? And then we can take climatic data, which we take from other scientists who are atmospheric scientists. And so we find out in that 1 kilometre squared, what kind of temperatures do we expect? What kind of precipitation, so rainfall levels do we expect?
There used to be glaciers coming down our rivers, right down to where the mountains' hills are, to where the foothills of the mountains are. There used to be huge glaciers. The puapua would have been much lower in those colder times, but as the ice has receded and our climate has warmed over our nation, the puapua and the puanani has started climbing up the mountain with the cold, chasing the cold basically, chasing its perfect environment.
So we expect that warming will help heather, and heather will become more dense and more widely distributed in the park. And we're concerned that there will be a declining area of the landscape where these Taonga Tipu plants can grow. Overall, our work has shown that it's not looking very good for our native plants. We need to be kaitiaki for these species. We need to identify where they're growing now and do weed control where we can, and we need to preserve them and maybe even rehabilitate areas that have been damaged by road building maybe, or with the development on the mountain. We need to have a diverse stock of plants that we can replant with.
Science is just different to the way whakaaro Māori is. For whakaaro Māori, we're looking at it from the inside out. We're part of the whole thing. But science seems to look at it from the outside in. I think we've got a lot to share with each other, especially in that respect. I believe it's one of the missing links where we have to one day put everything back together to see what we're missing. How do we do that? By preserving what we've got left for a start, so to make the transfer easier.
That all that's happening around our country, it's because Papa Tuanuku is losing its strength to care for itself. That Māori is getting weaker because of what we people are doing to her. I believe we've got to find ways, we've got to be stronger and be more interested in looking after those things, being mindful of those things, learning and how to care more for Papa Tuanuku, to realise what it is we need to do.
So this is the first time that I've worked with iwi on any project, and it's been a really cool process. It's really opened up my eyes. I've had several field assistants that we recruited from Ngāti Rangi, and I've just had so many different perspectives on this project, and that's been a really cool learning experience for me.
The opportunity here with this research between Ngāti Rangi and Victoria is that we now have a chance to do things differently. The opportunity going forward will be, what can we do together, because science isn't better than mātauranga Māori, but they both have their place. And how do we ensure that we are more intentional in finding that place where we join and respecting the places where we may differ. And by doing that, we can then learn how to work with each other and how to grow each other's knowledge and therefore complement each other.